I promised their families justice. I delivered graves.
The elevator stopped at the 13th floor, and David Kane knew his life was about to end. Not literally, though that would come later, but the life he'd built, the marriage he'd cherished, the trust he'd foolishly placed in the woman who shared his bed for 18 years. The security footage on his phone showed everything. His wife, Sarah, stepping into suite 1347, her fingers interlaced with those of a man David had helped get out of prison 6 years ago. 3 hours earlier, David had been reviewing quarterly logistics reports in his downtown Chicago office when his son Tyler called. "Dad, I think you should see this," Tyler said, his 17-year-old voice tight with anger. "Mom left her phone on the kitchen counter. A message popped up." David's stomach clenched. "What kind of message?" "From someone named Rick. It says, 'Can't wait to feel you again tonight, same suite, same floor.'" "You drive me crazy, baby." The words hit David like ice water. He stared at his computer screen, the supply chain analytics suddenly meaningless. 18 years of marriage, 2 kids, a mortgage they'd nearly paid off. Family vacations to Yellowstone and the Outer Banks. All of it built on what? Lies? "Tyler, don't say anything to your sister. Don't let your mother know you saw that." "Dad, what's going on?" "I'll handle it." David ended the call and sat in his leather chair, staring out at the Chicago skyline. He was 46 years old, a man who'd built his career on precision and planning. He didn't make rash decisions. He analyzed problems, identified solutions, executed methodically. This would be no different. He pulled up his contact list and dialed Pete Morrison, an old friend from his Army days who now ran a private security company. "Pete, I need a favor." "A big one." 2 hours later, David sat in his Audi outside the Fairmont Hotel, watching Sarah's silver BMW pull into the valet lane. She wore the black dress he'd bought her for their anniversary, last month when she'd told him she loved him, when she'd kissed him like she meant it, when she'd made love to him with what he'd thought was genuine passion. The valet opened her door, and Sarah stepped out, smoothing her dress. She looked beautiful. She looked guilty. She looked like a stranger. David's phone buzzed. Pete's text. "Cameras are in place, room 1425. Laptop's recording everything." David had booked the room directly below suite 1347. Pete's team had installed micro cameras in the hallway, the elevator, and, through a maintenance contact, the suite itself. If Sarah was cheating, David would have proof. If she wasn't, he'd apologize and work on whatever was broken in their marriage. But watching her walk through those hotel doors with the confidence of someone who'd done this before, David already knew which way this would go. His phone rang. Tyler again. "Dad, I'm worried. Mom came home an hour ago, took a shower, got all dressed up. She told Emma she was going to dinner with her book club friends." "What did you tell your sister?" "Nothing, but Emma's asking questions." "Mom's been acting weird for weeks." David closed his eyes. Emma was 15, smart as hell, and she idolized her mother. This would destroy her. "I'll be home later tonight. Order pizza for you and Emma." "Don't wait up." David walked into the hotel lobby, took the elevator to the 14th floor, and knocked on room 1425. Pete answered immediately. "You sure you want to see this?" Pete asked, gesturing to the laptop screens showing multiple camera feeds. "I need to know." The hallway camera showed Sarah stepping off the elevator at 7:43 p.m. She didn't hesitate, didn't check room numbers. She knew exactly where she was going. At 7:45, a man opened the door to suite 1347. David recognized him immediately, and his blood turned to acid. Rick Valdez. 6 years ago, David had testified as a character witness at Rick's parole hearing. Rick had been in prison for aggravated attack and fraud, but he'd claimed to be reformed, wanting a second chance. David, believing in redemption, had vouched for him. The parole board had been swayed, and Rick had walked free. Now Rick was kissing David's wife in a hotel doorway. "Son of a witch," Pete muttered. "You know this guy? I helped get him out of prison." The suite camera showed Sarah and Rick tearing each other's clothes off with the desperation of people who'd been doing this for a while. David watched his wife of 18 years perform with another man, and something cold and calculating settled into his chest, where his heart used to be. "Get me everything on Rick Valdez," David said. "Employment, address, financial records, criminal history, everything." "David, maybe you should—" "Everything, Pete. I'll pay whatever it costs." At 10:30 p.m., Sarah emerged from the elevator, her hair slightly mussed, her lipstick gone. She looked satisfied, happy. She looked like she'd just had the best night of her life while her husband sat 40 feet below her, planning her destruction. David drove home slowly, his mind working through possibilities. Divorce would be messy, expensive, and it would hurt the kids. Sarah would get half of everything, maybe more, with a good lawyer. She'd probably get primary custody. She'd walk away from this marriage with her dignity intact, her reputation untarnished, and her future secure. That wasn't going to happen. The next morning, David woke before dawn and made coffee while Sarah slept. When she finally came downstairs at 8, she was wearing his old Northwestern t-shirt and a guilty smile. "You were asleep when I got home," she said, kissing his cheek. Book club went late. "How was it?" David asked, not looking up from his laptop. "Good. We discussed the 7 husbands of Evelyn Hugo." David nodded, typing emails. "Interesting choice." "What did you think of Evelyn's approach to marriage?" Sarah paused, coffee cup halfway to her lips. "What do you mean?" "Using people, discarding them when they're no longer useful. Justifying betrayal as self-preservation." "I haven't finished it yet," Sarah said quickly. David looked up and smiled. "You should. The ending's brutal." That afternoon, David visited Pete's office in a converted warehouse on the south side. Pete had Rick Valdez's entire life spread across 3 bulletin boards like a serial butcher investigation. "Your boy's been busy," Pete said. "He's got a cybersecurity consulting company that's basically a front for identity theft and financial fraud. He's been running cons on wealthy divorced women for the past 3 years. Your wife might not be his first married target." David studied the timeline. "How long do you think this has been going on?" "Based on financial records, hotel receipts, and cell tower data, at least 8 months. 8 months. David's wedding anniversary was 9 months ago. Sarah had started cheating with Rick almost immediately after renewing her vows. "There's more," Pete said. "I've got a contact at Rick's parole officer's office. Rick's been reporting steady employment and clean living, but he's been arrested twice in the past year for bar fights. The charges were dropped both times. Looks like someone's been paying off lawyers and sufferers." "Sarah?" "That's my guess. She's been withdrawing cash regularly from your joint savings. Small amounts, nothing you'd notice, but it adds up to about 15 grand over 6 months. David felt something snap inside his chest. "She's been using our money to keep her boyfriend out of jail. Gets worse. I pulled your wife's phone records. She's been in contact with a divorce attorney for 3 weeks. Harold Kessler. He specializes in high-asset divorces where the husband's portrayed as abusive or unstable." David stared at the evidence wall. His wife wasn't just cheating. She was planning to destroy him, take his money, his kids, his reputation. She was going to paint him as a monster to justify her betrayal. "I want surveillance on both of them," David said. "Full coverage. I want to know every move they make, every person they talk to, every plan they're hatching. David, this could get expensive. I don't care what it costs." That evening, David played the perfect husband. He grilled steaks, helped Emma with her calculus homework, watched Tyler's lacrosse highlights, and cuddled with Sarah on the couch during a Netflix movie. She seemed relaxed, happy, occasionally checking her phone and smiling at messages she didn't share. "I've been thinking," Sarah said during a commercial break, "maybe we should take some time apart, just for a few months. I feel like I've lost myself in this marriage, you know? I need space to figure out who I am." David kept his expression neutral. "That's a big decision. Have you been thinking about this for a while?" "A few weeks. Maybe we could do a trial separation. Nothing official, just space." "Where would you stay?" "I could get an apartment, something temporary." David nodded thoughtfully. "If that's what you need, I'll support you. I love you too much to hold you back from finding yourself." Sarah's smile looked relieved and guilty at the same time. "Really? You're not angry?" "I'm hurt," David said honestly. "But if this is what it takes to save our marriage, I'm willing to try." That night, after Sarah fell asleep, David transferred $200,000 from their joint accounts into an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. He'd been planning their retirement for years, building a financial safety net. Now that safety net would protect him from whatever legal trap Sarah and her lawyer were setting. Over the next week, David played the role of the supportive husband going through a painful separation. He helped Sarah find a furnished apartment in Lincoln Park, helped her move her things, even bought her groceries for her first week of independence. Meanwhile, Pete's surveillance revealed the true scope of Sarah's betrayal. She'd been meeting with Harold Kessler twice a week, strategizing her divorce approach. Rick had been coaching her on what to say, how to act, what evidence to manufacture. They'd even practiced arguments, with Rick playing David, teaching Sarah how to provoke reactions that could be recorded and used against him. The surveillance also revealed something else. Sarah had recruited help. "Your wife's best friend Janet is in on it," Pete reported. "She's been helping Sarah document evidence of your alleged emotional misuse. They've been staging photographs, creating fake text message conversations, building a case that you're controlling and potentially violent." David felt a familiar cold rage settling in his chest. Janet Morrison had been Sarah's maid of honor. David had given Janet's husband business referrals worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. He'd helped Janet's son get into Northwestern. She'd been in his home, at his table, claiming to be family. What kind of evidence? Pete showed him photographs on his laptop. Sarah with fake bruises on her arms, Sarah crying into the camera, claiming David had screamed at her, threatened her, isolated her from friends. Janet had apparently been the photographer and witness for all of it. "They're building a domestic misuse case," Pete said. With Janet's testimony and these photos, Sarah could get a restraining order, primary custody of the kids, and a huge settlement. "She's not just leaving you, David. She's trying to destroy your reputation and your relationship with your children." David stared at the fake bruises on his wife's arm. He'd never raised a hand to her, never even raised his voice, but the photos looked convincing. Combined with Janet's testimony and a skilled lawyer, they could paint him as a monster. "I want to know everything about Janet's involvement, phone records, financial records, who else is helping them. And I want Rick Valdez followed 24 hours a day. If he jaywalks, I want to know about it." The trap was closing, but David wasn't the prey anymore. He was the hunter. 2 weeks into Sarah's trial separation, David received the call he'd been expecting. "Mr. Kane? This is Harold Kessler, your wife's attorney. I think we should meet to discuss the terms of your divorce." "Divorce?" David said, injecting just the right amount of surprise into his voice. "We're just separated. We're working on our marriage." "Mr. Kane, I think we both know this marriage is over. The question is whether we can resolve this amicably or whether it needs to get unpleasant." David smiled. "I'm not sure what you mean by unpleasant, Mr. Kessler. Your wife has documented a pattern of emotional and financial misuse. She has witnesses. She has evidence. If you contest this divorce, if you fight for custody or attempt to hide assets, that evidence will become public record." "I see. When did you want to meet?" "Tomorrow, 2 o'clock, my office." David hung up and called Pete. "It's time. Initiate Phase 2. Phase 2 had been in development for 3 weeks. Pete's team had installed surveillance equipment throughout Sarah's apartment, Rick's condo, and Janet's house. They'd hacked Rick's computer, cloned his phone, and infiltrated his financial accounts. They'd identified his previous sufferers, his current scams, his probation violations. Most importantly, they'd discovered Rick's fatal flaw. He couldn't resist bragging about his conquests. At 3 a.m., David's phone buzzed with a text from Pete. "Got it." The attached audio file was a recording from Rick's condo, captured 12 hours earlier. Rick was talking to someone on the phone. Based on context, another woman he was scamming. "This Chicago housewife is freaking perfect," Rick's voice said clearly. "Married to some corporate drone, got kids, big house, the whole suburban princess fantasy. She thinks I'm her ticket to excitement and romance, but really she's my retirement plan. I've got her wrapped around my finger, and she's financing the whole operation. She's even helping me frame her husband for misuse so we can take him for everything in the divorce. Dumb witch has no idea I'm running the same scam on 3 other wives in different states. By the time I'm done with her, she'll be broke, divorced, and destroyed, and I'll be living on a beach in Costa Rica." David played the recording 5 times, memorizing every word. Rick had just confessed to fraud, extortion, and conspiracy. More importantly, he'd revealed his contempt for Sarah, his plan to abandon her, and his intention to destroy her life just as thoroughly as he was destroying David's. David burned the audio file to a CD, made 7 copies, and labeled them carefully. Then he began making phone calls. The first call was to Rick's parole officer. "This is David Kane. I have evidence that Rick Valdez has been violating the terms of his parole. The second call was to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. I have evidence of an ongoing fraud and extortion scheme targeting multiple sufferers across state lines. The third call was to Channel 7 News. I have a story about a convicted felon who's been running romance scams on married women and using their money to avoid prosecution for new crimes. The fourth call was to Rick's previous sufferers, women Pete's team had identified in Milwaukee, Detroit, and Indianapolis. Women who'd been too ashamed and humiliated to press charges when Rick disappeared with their money and their dignity. This is David Kane. I have evidence that the man who victimized you is still active, still hurting people. I think it's time he faced consequences. By 9 a.m., David had distributed copies of Rick's confession to law enforcement agencies in 4 states, 3 news organizations, Rick's parole officer, the Illinois State Bar Association, and the email. Addresses of Rick's previous sufferers. At 10 a.m., David drove to Rick's condo and knocked on the door. Rick answered in a bathrobe, looking hungover and irritated. "What the hell do you want?" Rick said. "I want to talk to you about my wife." Recognition dawned in Rick's eyes, followed quickly by fear. "I don't know what you're talking about." David smiled and held up his phone, showing Rick the audio file. "I think you do." Rick tried to slam the door, but David's foot was already in the frame. David pushed the door open and stepped inside, closing it behind him. "I helped get you out of prison," David said quietly. "I vouched for your character. I told the parole board you deserved a second chance." "Look, man, it's not personal." David's fist connected with Rick's jaw, dropping him to the floor. David hadn't thrown a punch in 15 years, but muscle memory kicked in. He'd been a boxer in college, and the old skills came back quickly. "Don't get up," David said as Rick tried to stand. "We're going to have a conversation, and you're going to listen." Rick wiped crimson smear from his mouth. "You're damn crazy." "I'm calling the cops." "Go ahead. I'm sure they'd love to hear that confession you made last night. The one where you admit to running fraud schemes in multiple states, violating your parole, and planning to destroy my wife after you've used her?" Rick's face went pale. "You recorded me?" "I recorded everything. Your apartment, your phone calls, your meetings with Sarah, your strategy sessions with her lawyer. I know about Janet helping you fake misuse evidence. I know about the other women you victimized. I know about the bar fights, the bribery, the financial crimes. I know everything." David sat on Rick's couch, making himself comfortable. "Here's what's going to happen. In about an hour, the FBI is going to show up here with a warrant. They'll arrest you on federal fraud and extortion charges. Your parole will be revoked, so you'll go straight back to prison while awaiting trial. The sufferers you've scammed in other states are filing charges, so you'll be looking at multiple prosecutions. You can't do this. It's already done. But that's just the beginning." David pulled out his phone and played another audio recording. This one was from Sarah's apartment the previous evening. Sarah's voice. "I feel terrible about what we're doing to David. He's a good man. He doesn't deserve this." Rick's voice. "He's a mark, baby. That's all. Rich, naive, and stupid enough to trust people. We take him for everything and disappear. You'll get over the guilt when you're spending his money in the Bahamas." Sarah's voice. "What if he finds out? What if—" Rick's voice. "He won't. And if he does, we'll destroy him completely. We'll make him look like an abusive monster. We'll take his kids, his reputation, his business relationships. By the time we're done with him, he'll be lucky if he doesn't eliminate himself." David stopped the recording. Rick's face had gone from pale to green. "Your girlfriend really loves you," David said. "Too bad you see her as just another mark." Rick struggled to his feet. "She doesn't have to know about this. We can make a deal." "There's no deal. In 30 minutes, copies of all these recordings are being delivered to Sarah's apartment, her office, her parents, her sister, and every member of her book club. She'll know exactly what you really think of her. She'll know that everything you told her was a lie, that you never cared about her, that you were planning to abandon her broken, humiliated." David stood up and walked to the door. "You've got maybe 20 minutes before the FBI gets here. I'd suggest you use that time to call a lawyer." "Wait, what do you want? Money? I can pay you." David turned back. "I want you to understand something. You came after my family. You seduced my wife, stole my money, and tried to destroy my relationship with my children. You made this personal. Now you get to live with the consequences." David left Rick's condo and drove to Sarah's apartment. He used the key she'd given him, back when she was pretending this was just a temporary separation, and let himself in. Sarah was in the kitchen, making coffee, wearing one of Rick's t-shirts. She looked up in surprise when David walked in. "David? What are you doing here? You're supposed to call first." David set a thick manila envelope on the kitchen counter. "Open it." "What is it?" "Evidence. Recordings, photographs, bank records, everything." Sarah's hands shook as she opened the envelope. David watched her face change as she looked through the contents. Rick's confession about using her, the fake misuse photos, the financial records showing her theft from their joint accounts, the evidence of Rick's other sufferers. "Where did you get this?" she whispered. "I've been investigating you for a month, ever since Tyler showed me Rick's text message." Sarah's face crumpled. "David, I can explain." "Explain what? That you've been cheating on me for 8 months? That you've been stealing our money to pay Rick's legal bills? That you've been planning to frame me for misuse to win our divorce? That your best friend has been helping you fake evidence against me?" Sarah started crying. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I never meant for it to go this far." "Listen to this," David said, playing Rick's confession on his phone. Sarah listened to the man she'd thought she loved describe her as a dumb witch and a retirement plan. She heard him laugh about destroying her life, heard him brag about running the same scam on other women. "He doesn't love you," David said quietly. "He never did. You were just another mark." Sarah collapsed onto a kitchen chair, sobbing. "Oh, God. Oh, God, what have I done?" David felt a moment of pity for her, seeing her realize how completely she'd been manipulated and betrayed. Then he remembered the fake bruises, the stolen money, the plan to take his children away from him, and the pity evaporated. "You destroyed our marriage for a man who saw you as a paycheck," David said. "You were willing to frame me as a misuser, take my children, and ruin my reputation for someone who was planning to abandon you as soon as the divorce was final. I know I screwed up, but we can fix this, right? We can work through this?" David looked at his wife of 18 years, the mother of his children, the woman he'd once loved more than his own life. She looked small and broken and pathetic. "No," he said. "We can't." He pulled out his phone and showed her a news article that had gone live 20 minutes earlier. "Convicted felon arrested in multi-state romance scam." "Rick's going back to prison," David said. "The FBI has evidence of his fraud schemes, his parole violations, and his conspiracy to commit extortion. He'll probably get 20 years. Sarah read the article, her face growing paler. "They mentioned me. They say I was one of his sufferers. That's the story I gave them. You're a sufferer, not an accomplice. Rick manipulated you, used you, convinced you to do things you normally wouldn't do. You're not going to be charged with anything." Sarah looked up hopefully. "So we can rebuild? We can—" "No, I'm filing for divorce. I have evidence of your infidelity, your theft from our joint accounts, and your conspiracy to frame me for misuse. I'll get primary custody of the kids, and you'll get exactly what the prenup entitles you to, which after legal fees won't be much." "The prenup? We don't have a prenup." David smiled. "We do now. Remember that document you signed last month? The one Janet witnessed? You thought it was updating our life insurance beneficiaries. It was actually a post-nuptial agreement that becomes valid in the event of infidelity." Sarah's face went white. "That's not possible. That's not legal. Ask Harold Kessler." "Oh, wait, you can't. The Illinois State Bar is investigating him for helping clients fabricate evidence. He'll probably lose his license." David walked toward the door, then turned back. "The kids know. I told them everything. Tyler's angry at you, but he'll probably forgive you eventually. Emma," David shrugged, "Emma worships you. Learning that her perfect mother is a lying, cheating thief might be harder for her to get over. You told our children I was cheating? How could you do that to them?" "I didn't tell them anything that wasn't true. They deserved to know why their family was falling apart. They deserved to know that it wasn't my fault." David opened the apartment door. "You've got 30 days to find somewhere else to live. I'm changing the locks on the house tonight." That afternoon, David met with his real divorce attorney, not Harold Kessler, but Margaret Collins, the most ruthless divorce lawyer in Chicago. "Your wife's attorney has been calling my office all day," Margaret said. "He wants to negotiate." "What's he offering?" Joint custody, 50-50 split of assets, no alimony. David laughed. 2 months ago, he was threatening to destroy me with fake misuse allegations. Now he wants to negotiate? His legal strategy fell apart when his client turned out to be a criminal conspirator and his evidence turned out to be fabricated. He's trying to salvage whatever he can. What can we get? Margaret smiled. Primary custody. She gets her car and whatever personal items she brought into the marriage, and she pays her own legal fees. The postnup you had her sign is ironclad. Make it happen. 3 months later, David's divorce was finalized. Sarah moved in with her sister in Indianapolis, taking a job as a receptionist at a dental office. Rick was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Janet Morrison's husband filed for divorce after learning about her role in the conspiracy, and she lost her house and her social standing. David kept the house, got primary custody of Tyler and Emma, and maintained his reputation and his business. The story that emerged publicly was that he was the innocent sufferer of a con man who had manipulated his wife into betraying her family. But that wasn't the end. 6 months after the divorce, David received a phone call from Emma. "Dad, I need to tell you something about Mom and Rick and everything that happened." Emma was living with David but had been visiting Sarah on weekends. David had thought she was adjusting well to the new arrangement, but her voice sounded strained. "What is it, sweetheart?" "I knew." David felt his blood turn cold. "Knew what?" "About Mom and Rick. I saw them together months before Tyler found that text message. I saw them kissing in our driveway when you were at work." David sat down heavily. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I was scared. Mom made me promise not to tell. She said you'd be devastated, that it would destroy our family. She said she was going to end it and work on fixing your marriage. But she didn't end it. No, it got worse. And then when you found out and everything fell apart, I felt like it was my fault, like I could have prevented it if I'd told you sooner." David's heart broke for his daughter. "Emma, honey, this wasn't your fault." "None of it was your fault. There's more, Dad. Mom asked me to help her." "Help her how?" Emma started crying. "She wanted me to lie about you. She wanted me to tell the divorce judge that you were mean to me, that you scared me. She said it would help her get custody so we could all be together." David felt the familiar cold rage settling in his chest. Sarah had been willing to traumatize their teenage daughter, to force her to lie under oath, to destroy David's relationship with his children. "What did you tell her?" "I said no. I said I wouldn't lie about you because you never hurt me, never hurt anybody." She got really angry. "She said I was being selfish, that I was choosing sides instead of thinking about what was best for our family. You did the right thing, Emma." "Did I? Because now Mom barely talks to me. She thinks I betrayed her. And Tyler still doesn't trust me because I knew about the affair and didn't tell anyone." David drove to Indianapolis that evening. Sarah was living in a cramped apartment in a rundown complex, working a dead-end job, her life in shambles. But she'd been willing to drag her own daughter down with her. David knocked on Sarah's door at 9 o'clock. She opened it looking exhausted and defeated. "David, what are you doing here?" "We need to talk about Emma." Sarah let him in. The apartment was small and depressing, a far cry from the 4-bedroom house she'd given up for Rick's empty promises. "Emma told me what you asked her to do," David said. "You wanted our 15-year-old daughter to commit perjury." "You wanted her to lie under oath about her own father." Sarah's face flushed with anger and shame. "I was desperate. I'd lost everything. I thought if I could get custody—" "You'd already lost custody because you're an adulteress and a thief. Asking Emma to lie wouldn't have changed that. I know it was wrong. But I was scared and alone, and I thought—" "You thought you'd sacrifice our daughter's integrity to save yourself." David sat on Sarah's cheap couch and looked at the woman who'd once been his partner, his best friend, his future. "Rick destroyed your life, just like he planned. But you were willing to destroy Emma's life too. That's not desperation, Sarah. That's evil." Sarah started crying. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I never meant for any of this to happen. But it did happen. And now Emma feels guilty for not preventing it. Tyler doesn't trust her, and you're alienated from both of your children. Was it worth it? No, God, no. I'd give anything to take it all back." David stood up. "You can't take it back, but you can stop making it worse." He walked to the door, then turned back. Emma loves you. Despite everything you've done, she still loves you. But if you keep trying to manipulate her, if you keep making her feel guilty for your choices, you'll lose her forever. David drove home through the Indiana darkness, thinking about the wreckage Sarah had left behind. Rick was in prison. His sufferers had gotten some measure of justice, and David had protected his children and his reputation. But the cost had been enormous. His marriage was over, his family was broken, his children were traumatized. His faith in people was shattered. He'd won the war, but victory felt hollow. A year later, David's life had settled into a new normal. Tyler had graduated high school and was attending Northwestern on a lacrosse scholarship. Emma was thriving academically and had a good relationship with both parents, though she saw Sarah only once a month. David had been promoted to regional vice president and was dating a woman he'd met at a charity fundraiser. The past felt distant until the day Rick Valdez called him from prison. "Kane, this is Rick Valdez. I think we need to talk." David had been expecting this call for months. "What do you want?" "I want to make things right between us." "There's nothing to make right. You're in prison where you belong. I'm getting out next month. Good behavior, overcrowded facilities, you know how it works." "I'll be on supervised release." David felt his blood pressure spike. "That's impossible. You were sentenced to 15 years. Federal sentencing guidelines are complicated. I've got a good lawyer, and I've been a model prisoner. I'll be out in 30 days. Stay away from my family. That's what I want to talk about. I want to start over. Clean slate. I've learned my lesson, and I want to make amends." David hung up and immediately called Margaret Collins. "Rick Valdez is getting out of prison," he said. "That's impossible. He was sentenced to—" "Check with the Bureau of Prisons. Check now." Margaret called back an hour later. "You're right. He's being released on supervised probation in 3 weeks. Apparently, he provided information that helped solve several other fraud cases, and the judge reduced his sentence as a reward for cooperation." David felt the familiar cold rage building. Rick had manipulated the system again, just like he'd manipulated Sarah, just like he'd manipulated the parole board 6 years earlier. What are my legal options? If he violates the terms of his probation, he goes back to prison. But unless he commits a new crime or violates specific probation conditions, there's nothing you can do to keep him locked up. What if he contacts me or my family? You could get a restraining order, but you'd need evidence that he poses a threat. David ended the call and sat in his office, staring at the Chicago skyline. Rick Valdez was getting out of prison, and there was nothing David could do to stop it legally. But David had learned a lot about operating outside the law over the past 2 years. He called Pete Morrison. "Rick Valdez is getting out," David said. "Son of a witch. When? 3 weeks. I want full surveillance starting the day he's released. I want to know where he goes, who he talks to, what he's planning." "You think he'll come after you?" "I think Rick Valdez is a hunter who doesn't learn from his mistakes. I think he blames me for destroying his life, and I think he's going to want revenge." Pete was quiet for a moment. "And if he does come after you, then he'll discover that I don't learn from my mistakes either." Rick was released from federal prison on a Tuesday morning in March. By Tuesday afternoon, Pete's surveillance team was documenting his every move. Rick took a bus to a halfway house on the south side, checked in with his probation officer, and had dinner at a McDonald's. By Thursday, he'd violated his probation 3 times. He'd left the county without permission to visit his ex-girlfriend in Wisconsin. He'd been drinking at a bar in violation of his alcohol restrictions, and he'd been using a prepaid cell phone that wasn't registered with his probation officer. David could have reported the violations immediately and sent Rick back to prison. But he wanted to see what Rick was planning first. The surveillance revealed Rick's intentions within a week. He'd contacted Sarah twice, trying to convince her to meet him. He'd driven past David's house 3 times. Most disturbing, he'd been asking questions about Tyler's class schedule at Northwestern and Emma's high school routine. "He's planning something," Pete reported. "My gut says he's going after your kids." David felt ice in his veins. "Get me everything. Phone records, financial transactions, who he's been talking to, and increase security around Tyler and Emma." "Already done. I've got people watching them both." David's phone rang that evening while he was helping Emma with her chemistry homework. The caller ID showed Sarah's number. "David, Rick called me. He wants to meet. What did you tell him?" I said no. I told him I never wanted to see him again. But he kept pushing. He said he had information about you that I needed to hear. What kind of information? He wouldn't say. But David, he sounded different, angry, dangerous. I'm scared he might try to hurt someone. David looked at Emma, bent over her textbook, unaware that the man who'd destroyed her family was now free and possibly planning to hurt her. Sarah, if he contacts you again, don't answer. Call the police immediately. Should I be worried about the kids? The kids are protected. Just stay away from him. David hung up and called Pete. I want Rick Valdez back in prison tonight. On what charges? Probation violations? Whatever it takes. But Pete called back an hour later with bad news. Rick's probation officer says the violations aren't severe enough to warrant immediate revocation. Leaving the county was a misunderstanding. The drinking was 1 beer with dinner, and lots of parolees use unregistered phones. He got a warning and a lecture, but he's still free. David felt the system failing him again, just like it had failed Rick's other sufferers, just like it had failed his marriage. The law was designed to protect people like Rick, manipulative, charismatic hunters who knew how to work the system. What about the threatening phone calls to Sarah? He didn't threaten her. He asked to meet her. Annoying, but not illegal. And stalking my family? Driving on public roads isn't stalking. We need evidence of direct threats or contact. David realized he was on his own. Again. That Saturday, Tyler came home from Northwestern for the weekend. David hadn't told either of his children about Rick's release, hoping to resolve the situation before they had to worry about it. But Tyler had news that changed everything. Dad, something weird happened at school yesterday. This guy approached me after lacrosse practice, said he knew you and wanted to talk. David's blood turned to ice. What guy? Middle-aged Latino, kind of sleazy looking. He said his name was Rick and that you two had some unfinished business. He wanted me to give you a message. What message? He said to tell you that debts always come due and that you owe him 2 years of his life. David felt the walls closing in. Rick was escalating, moving from surveillance to direct contact with David's children. Tyler, this man is dangerous. If you see him again, don't talk to him. Call the police immediately. Who is he? David had tried to protect his children from the ugliest details of their mother's affair, but Rick's threat had forced his hand. He's the man your mother was cheating with. He's the one who manipulated her into betraying our family. He just got out of prison and he blames me for destroying his life. Tyler's face darkened with anger. He's threatening us because you stopped him from stealing our money? He's threatening us because he's a hunter who can't accept responsibility for his actions. But I'm going to handle this. How? David looked at his son, 18 years old, strong, brave, and innocent. Tyler had no idea what David was capable of when his family was threatened. Let me worry about that. That night, David drove to the address Pete had provided for Rick's halfway house. It was a converted motel in a rough neighborhood, housing parolees and dependents trying to rebuild their lives. David parked across the street and waited. Rick emerged at 11 p.m., walking to a nearby bar despite his probation restrictions. David followed on foot, staying in the shadows. The bar was a dive frequented by ex-cons and people with nowhere else to go. David waited until Rick was alone in the parking lot, then approached him. Hello, Rick. Rick spun around, startled, then smiled when he recognized David. Well, David Kane. I was wondering when you'd show up. Stay away from my family. Or what? You'll have me arrested? You'll ruin my life? Already tried that, remember? David stepped closer. I'm warning you once. Leave Chicago. Leave Illinois. Disappear and never contact me or my family again. Rick laughed. You think you won? You think you destroyed me? I spent 2 years in prison planning my comeback, and you're the main event. What do you want? I want my life back. I want compensation for the 2 years you stole from me. And I want you to know what it feels like to lose everything. You destroyed your own life. You chose to be a criminal. I chose to take what was offered. Your wife threw herself at me, begged me to rescue her from her boring marriage. She paid for everything, planned everything. I was just along for the ride. David felt his control slipping. You manipulated her. You used her. I gave her what she wanted. Excitement, passion, freedom from playing housewife to a corporate drone. She was grateful. David's fist connected with Rick's jaw before he realized he'd thrown the punch. Rick staggered, but didn't fall. There's the real David Kane, Rick said, wiping crimson smear from his mouth. Not the perfect husband and father, just another violent a-hole who can't handle the truth. David punched him again, harder this time. Rick went down but rolled away before David could follow up. I'm going to destroy your kids, Rick said from the ground. Your precious Tyler and Emma. I'm going to seduce Emma just like I seduced her mother. I'm going to turn her against you, make her hate you. And Tyler? I'm going to frame him for pill dealing, get him kicked out of Northwestern, ruin his future. David pulled Rick to his feet and slammed him against a car. You won't get near my children. I'm already near them. I know Tyler's class schedule, his dorm room number, his girlfriend's name. I know where Emma goes to school, what time she gets out, which route she takes home. I know everything about your family, and there's nothing you can do to stop me. David released Rick and stepped back. You're right. There's nothing I can do to stop you legally. Rick smiled triumphantly. Finally, you're learning. David's knee connected with Rick's solar plexus, dropping him to the pavement. While Rick gasped for air, David pulled out his phone and played a recording. I'm going to destroy your kids, your precious Tyler and Emma. I'm going to seduce Emma, just like I seduced her mother. Rick's face went pale as he heard his own voice making threats against children. Threatening minors is a felony, David said, especially when you're on probation for fraud and extortion. This recording goes to your probation officer first thing Monday morning. You can't use that. You recorded me without consent. Illinois is a one-party consent state. As long as one person in the conversation consents to recording, it's legal. And I consented. David knelt next to Rick, who was still struggling to breathe. You made a mistake coming after my children. I was willing to let you live your pathetic life in peace, but you couldn't leave well enough alone. You're making a mistake, Rick wheezed. I've got friends, people who owe me favors. If something happens to me, nothing's going to happen to you. You're going back to prison where you belong, and this time, you're going to serve your full sentence. David stood up and walked back to his car, leaving Rick gasping in the parking lot. But as he drove home, David realized Rick had been right about one thing. This wasn't over. Monday morning, Rick's probation was revoked and he was arrested on charges of threatening minors and violating parole. But his threat about having friends turned out to be real. Wednesday evening, Emma called David from school, crying, Dad, someone posted pictures online. Horrible pictures with my face on them. David's heart stopped. What kind of pictures? Naked pictures. They're not real. Someone photoshopped my face onto someone else's body, but they look real. Everyone at school has seen them. David felt murderous rage building in his chest. Where were they posted? Social media, anonymous message boards, even sent directly to kids at school. Someone created fake profiles using my name and posted them everywhere. David called Pete immediately. Someone's posted fake photos without clothes of Emma online. Find out who and shut it down. On it. But David, this has Rick's fingerprints all over it. Revenge adult movie, especially targeting minors, is his specialty. He's in jail. He's got accomplices, people who know his methods, his techniques. This is psychological warfare designed to humiliate your daughter and force you to make a mistake. David picked up Emma from school and found her devastated. The photos had spread throughout her high school within hours. Her friends were supportive, but the damage was done. Everyone had seen the images, real or not. I can't go back to school, Emma sobbed. Everyone's looking at me, whispering about me. I want to die. David held his daughter while she cried, feeling helpless and furious. Rick had found a way to hurt his family even from prison. We're going to find whoever did this, David promised. And we're going to make them pay. Pete's investigation revealed the scope of Rick's network. He'd been working with 3 other ex-cons, running sophisticated cyber harassment campaigns against his enemies' families. They specialized in targeting young females, using fake photos without clothes, cyberbullying, and social media manipulation to destroy young women's reputations and mental health. It's psychological torture, Pete explained. They call it eliminating the children to punish the parents. They drive teenagers to self-destruction attempts, self-damage, eating disorders, pill misuse. It's the most effective revenge strategy because parents will do anything to protect their kids. David stared at the evidence board showing Rick's network, their previous sufferers, their methods. How many families have they destroyed? At least a dozen over the past 5 years. The FBI has been trying to build a case, but these guys are smart. They use foreign servers, anonymous payment methods, untraceable communications. They're ghosts. What about the photos of Emma? Uploaded from a coffee shop in Milwaukee using stolen Wi-Fi credentials. Could have been anyone. David felt the system failing him again. Rick and his accomplices were untouchable, protected by technology, jurisdictional issues, and their own cunning. Meanwhile, Emma was suffering, Tyler was afraid to return to Northwestern, and David's family was under siege. "I want to meet with the other sufferers," David said. "The families Rick's network has targeted." Pete arranged a meeting at a hotel conference room in downtown Chicago. 7 families attended, parents whose children had been targeted by Rick's revenge network. Their stories were heartbreaking. Teenagers who'd attempted self-destruction, dropped out of school, developed eating disorders, turned to pills or self-damage. The psychological damage was devastating and permanent. "The FBI says they're building a case," said Maria Santos, whose 16-year-old daughter had been targeted after Maria testified against Rick in his fraud trial. But that was 2 years ago. Meanwhile, these monsters keep hurting children. "My son eliminated himself," said James Wright quietly. "He was 17. They posted fake photos, created fake social media profiles, convinced his classmates he was a pedophile. He couldn't handle the humiliation." David felt sick. Rick's network wasn't just committing crimes. They were destroying lives, driving children to self-destruction, traumatizing families beyond repair. "What if we stopped waiting for the FBI?" David asked. The room fell silent. "What do you mean?" Maria asked. "I mean, what if we handled this ourselves? What if we found these people and made them stop?" "You're talking about vigilante justice," said another parent. "I'm talking about protecting our children when the system won't." The meeting ended without resolution, but David exchanged contact information with 3 of the parents, people who were desperate enough to consider extreme measures. That night, David sat in his home office, staring at photos of Emma from happier times. She'd been a confident, outgoing teenager before Rick's associates destroyed her reputation. Now she was withdrawn, anxious, afraid to leave the house. David's phone rang. Pete Morrison. "I've got good news and bad news. The good news is we found one of Rick's accomplices. Guy named Danny Torres lives in Milwaukee. He's the one who uploaded the photos of Emma." "What's the bad news?" "Torres is in Mexico. Skipped town 2 days ago, probably tipped off by someone in Rick's network. The FBI can't touch him." David closed his eyes. Another dead end. Another criminal escaping justice while his daughter suffered. "Pete, I need you to find Torres. I don't care if he's in Mexico, Brazil, or on the moon. Find him." "David, what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that if the system won't protect my family, I'll protect them myself." 2 weeks later, Pete called with Torres's location, a beach resort in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, where he was living under a false identity and running the same cyber harassment schemes on Mexican sufferers. "He's not hiding," Pete reported. "He's openly operating, using local teenagers as accomplices, targeting wealthy Mexican families. The local police are either paid off or incompetent." David made a decision that would change everything. "Book me a flight to Puerto Vallarta." "David, whatever you're planning, I'm going on vacation, alone. If something happens to Torres while I'm there, it'll be a coincidence." David flew to Mexico with a fake passport Pete had provided, checked into a hotel near the resort where Torres was staying, and began surveillance. Torres was exactly what David had expected. A sleazy hunter in his 30s, spending stolen money on luxury hotels and local courtesan while destroying the lives of children thousands of miles away. David watched Torres for 3 days, learning his routines, identifying his vulnerabilities. On the 4th night, David made his move. Torres was drunk at a beachside bar, hitting on teenage tourist girls and boasting about his computer skills. David waited until Torres stumbled back to his hotel room alone, then followed him inside. "Danny Torres?" Torres spun around, startled and disoriented. "Who the hell are you?" "How did you get in here?" "I'm Emma Kane's father." Recognition dawned in Torres's eyes, followed quickly by fear. "Look, man, that wasn't personal, just business." "Business?" David stepped closer. "You posted fake photos of my 15-year-old daughter. You destroyed her reputation, her self-esteem, her mental health. You call that business?" "It was just Photoshop, man." "Not real pictures." David's fist connected with Torres's nose, breaking it instantly. Torres screamed and fell backward onto his bed. "My daughter tried to eliminate herself because of what you did," David said quietly. She swallowed a bottle of her mother's sleeping pills because she couldn't handle the humiliation. I didn't know. You didn't care. David pulled Torres upright and kicked him again, splitting his lip. How many children have you targeted? How many families have you destroyed? Torres was crying now, warm fluid streaming down his face. I was just following orders. Rick Valdez pays me to target specific kids. I don't choose the sufferers. Who else is in the network? I can't tell you that. They'll eliminate me. David smiled coldly. I'll eliminate you if you don't. Torres broke after 10 minutes of systematic violence. He gave David names, addresses, methods, financial accounts. Rick's network included 7 people across 4 states, all targeting children to punish their parents. They'd driven 4 teenagers to self-destruction, hospitalized dozens more, and destroyed countless families. What happens now? Torres whimpered. Now you disappear, David said. You leave Mexico tonight. You go somewhere far away and never contact anyone in Rick's network again. If I ever hear that you've hurt another child, I'll find you and finish what I started. Torres nodded frantically. I'll disappear. I swear. David pulled out his phone and showed Torres a video he'd been recording. This conversation never happened. But if you change your mind about disappearing, this video goes to Rick's other associates, the FBI, and the families you've victimized. They'll know you gave up the entire network. David left Torres bleeding in his hotel room and flew back to Chicago. 3 days later, Pete confirmed that Torres had vanished from Puerto Vallarta and hadn't been seen since. 1 down, David said. 6 to go. Over the next 6 months, David systematically hunted down Rick's associates. He used the information Torres had provided, combined with Pete's investigative resources, to locate and confront each member of the network. Some were easier than others. Marcus Webb in Detroit was a coward who broke immediately when David showed up at his apartment. Sarah Chen in Los Angeles required more persuasion, but eventually agreed to shut down her operations and disappear. Frank Rodriguez in Phoenix tried to fight back and ended up hospitalized with a skull fracture. Each confrontation followed the same pattern. David would present evidence of their crimes, offer them a chance to disappear voluntarily, and resort to violence when they refused. By the end of the campaign, Rick's entire network had been dismantled. His associates had fled to different countries or gone into hiding, and the cyber harassment campaigns had stopped. The families of previous sufferers began reporting that the attacks against their children had ceased. Self-destruction attempts dropped to 0. Several teenagers who'd been targeted returned to school for the first time in months. Emma's fake photos without clothes were scrubbed from the internet by Pete's cybersecurity team. She returned to school, rebuilt her reputation, and slowly regained her confidence. Tyler finished his freshman year at Northwestern without incident. But David's war wasn't over. Rick was still in prison, still coordinating attacks through other criminals, still planning his next move against David's family. David visited Rick in federal prison on a cold Tuesday in November. Well, well, Rick said, as he sat down across from David in the visiting room. I wondered when you'd show up. Your network is gone. Every one of your associates has disappeared or been neutralized. Rick smiled. You think you won something? I've got new associates, new networks, new ways to hurt your family. Actually, you don't. David slid a folder across the table. Rick opened it and found photographs of his remaining associates, all dead, missing, or in hiding. What did you do? Rick whispered. I protected my family, something you made necessary when you decided to target children. You're a murderer. I'm a father. And you threatened my children? Rick's face went pale as he realized the scope of David's campaign. The FBI will figure this out. They'll connect you to these disappearances. What disappearances? Danny Torres moved to Thailand to start a new life. Marcus Webb relocated to Eastern Europe. Sarah Chen changed her identity and moved to Canada. They all decided to pursue other opportunities. You can't prove any of this, Rick said, but his voice lacked conviction. I don't need to prove anything. Your network is gone, your associates are terrified, and you're going to spend the next 13 years in prison thinking about what happens to people who threaten children. David stood up to leave, then turned back. Oh, and Rick? I had a conversation with the warden about your safety in here. Seems like word has gotten out that you target teenage girls. Child hunters don't do well in federal prison. Rick's face went white. You can't do this. You can't just... I already did. David walked out of the federal prison and never looked back. 3 months later, Rick Valdez was found dead in his cell, apparently eliminated by another inmate who'd learned about his crimes against children. David felt no guilt, no remorse, no regret. Rick had chosen to be a hunter. He'd chosen to target innocent children to punish their parents. He'd chosen to escalate a conflict that could have ended with a simple divorce. Rick had made his choices, and David had made his. 5 years later, David remarried a woman who understood his past and accepted his methods. Tyler graduated from Northwestern and started law school. Emma recovered from her trauma and went to college, where she studied cybersecurity and sufferer advocacy. Sarah moved to Seattle and remarried a man who didn't know about her past. She sent birthday cards to Tyler and Emma, but maintained minimal contact otherwise. David never spoke to her again. The other families Rick had targeted rebuilt their lives. James Wright, whose son had committed self-destruction, started a foundation to help teenagers victimized by cyber harassment. Maria Santos became an advocate for stronger laws against revenge adult movie and online stalking. David returned to his quiet life as a logistics executive, but he kept Pete Morrison's company on retainer, just in case. The system had failed to protect his family, so David had created his own system. It wasn't legal, it wasn't moral by conventional standards, but it was effective. Rick Valdez and his associates had learned too late that some fathers will do anything to protect their children. Anything at all. On a cold December evening, exactly 7 years after Rick's first text message to Sarah, David sat in his study reading Tyler's law school acceptance letters. Emma called from college to tell him about her internship with the FBI's cybercrime division. His children were safe, successful, and happy. His family was rebuilt and protected. His enemies were dead or scattered to the winds. David poured himself a glass of whiskey and raised it in a toast to the memory of Rick Valdez, the man who'd tried to destroy David's family and learned that some mistakes are fatal. Justice had been served, just not by the courts.